Hi everyone, just making a quick video on the essay question, one of the holiday homework essay questions. I spent quite a lot of time on this thinking my own response out, so don't think that what I run through here I did in 5 minutes. I think over time you can get really quick at obviously interpreting a question, but this is the first one I've done in ages, and it did take me quite a while to figure out how I would have approached the question. Anyway, here goes. So the first thing is, here's the question. Does the novel suggest that the British are anything other than imperialist invaders? So I've highlighted 4 things in this question that I want to address. One is first, this novel suggests. That alerts us to the fact that the question is really explicitly asking us about the author's message or her intention in this novel. So you want to, the whole way through the novel, be drawing attention to what Kate Grenville, the author of The Lieutenant, is trying to say in this text. Think about her purpose. What are the ideas that she wants the reader to take away from the novel? And here we have a question that's asking what those ideas are, and it then goes on to be a bit more specific about that. So, does the novel suggest that the British are anything other than imperialist invaders? First of all, let's look at this term imperialist invaders. In order to understand and respond to this question, you need to know what being an imperialist is. That relates, and also have some vocabulary around that and some understanding of it. Being an imperialist relates to having when one country takes over another country in order to exploit that country economically, often ripping off natural resources or forcing the population to work for it, taking the land. And, there's 2 kind of main types of colonial imperialist exploitation that took place, in the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th and 20th centuries. There was the settler states like North America, Australia, New Zealand, where there was an indigenous population and settlers came and displaced them and populated that place themselves. Obviously, the indigenous people remained and struggled to survive and did survive, but on very large amounts of the land were taken by settlers from somewhere else. And the other type is the colonial taking over of countries where the indigenous infrastructure and people remained, and there was just like a military takeover where they were forced to obey rules, and then basically they got ripped off. The wealth of the country was ripped off and shipped back to Europe, and that was places like Indonesia, India, parts of Africa, lots of countries in Africa, and so forth. So you need to know that an imperialist invader is a European, generally a European country that has gone into a country somewhere else in the world and taken it over in order to exploit it, usually for money, but also for power. So part of the thing that imperialists did was they took over places to have another base or to control a region, because it was next door to some other colony they were interested in. So it was about shoring up their place in the world in terms of money and power. So the British taking Australia was partly, well, it's probably too complex an issue to go in here, but part of it was opening up a base in a different part of the world where they thought they could establish a new source of wealth over time, while at the same time ridding themselves of a lot of convicts that they didn't have space for. So it's asking, were the British anything more than people who go around invading and ripping off other countries? So anything other than means more than or better than, I think, in this question. Were they anything better than that or anything other? Was there anything about what they were doing that was different to just ripping off these people. And that brings us back to the word British. And I think this is really important here, and good essays are not just going to lump all the British in together as one unified thing. They're going to think about the fact that the British is made up of the king and those at the top that make the decisions and hold all the power and who end up with the wealth. Underneath them, there are the military leaders who are in charge of the expeditions to various parts of the world. And in the novel, the main one there is Gilbert, Governor Gilbert. Under them, you've got the ordinary soldiers and sailors whose job it is to obey orders and put it into practice, and to do as they're told. And you've got to, wonder, are those people really the same as, the people at the top who are ordering this, these actions? Do their interests lie together? Should we judge them in the same way? And then finally, in this case, we've also got the convicts who are also British, but are clearly not imperialist invaders. They're not there at all. They're not there by choice. And so when you start to look at this question, because we know that the British, some of them are imperialist invaders. Definitely that was the agenda of the British government, that they wanted to go into this new land and take it over and exploit it, definitely. But is that all there is to it? And is that all Grenville thinks there is to it? What happens when we start to think about Governor Gilbert and the other military people that were in New South Wales? How did they feel about what they were doing? How do the soldiers and sailors feel about what they're doing? How are they represented in Grenville's text? How are the convicts represented in Grenville's text? And when I thought about that, what I ended up with was, the ways that these people, things that they were other than being imperialist invaders are, in some senses, some of them are victims. The convicts, for example, they are more than invaders. They're actually themselves the victims of imperialism and of a system that is hierarchical and brutal and all the rest of it. And in some cases also the soldiers and sailors are represented as people who are caught up in a system that they can't control, and as people who are just trying to survive in a situation where they have very little in the way of power or opportunity to better their lives. I think, and in fact, what I'm going to do when I construct my paragraph, you'll see here I've looked at this already and I've thought this through, and I'm going to make my first paragraph. See, I put a little one there. I'm going to make my first paragraph actually around these victims and people trying to survive, and I'm going to use my first paragraph, as I pretty much always do when I'm writing my lieutenant essays. I use it to give a bit of an overview of the world of the text and the problems that the protagonist faces in terms of the British imperialism and the difficulties that he has. So I usually use that first paragraph to kind of set up the situation. Okay, so my second paragraph, I am going to look at an aspect of some of the British where they are more than invaders, where they do something else. And I'm going to look at the way that Grenville represents them as being people who are curious, people who are desirous of some kind of connection to the Indigenous people that they see. They want to communicate with them, learn more about them. They're curious. On some level, they're not wishing them ill at first, at least, and they're looking for relationships. And I'm going to qualify that because it's pretty flawed and falls apart pretty quickly for a lot of the British. But Rooke and Gardner are two people who really, really, really want that connection. They are curious. They want relationships, and something real comes out of that, particularly with respect to Rooke. So that's going to be my second paragraph, is going to be saying that the novel suggests that some of the British are more than invaders. They are people that want to do this, okay? And then my third paragraph, I'm going to look at the idea of people fighting the system, fighting back against the system. I've said in paragraph 1 that the system is very hard to fight, but actually the text says it is possible to fight, and that maybe morally, ethically, one has a duty to stand up against it. And we have in the text we could easily discuss the difficulties of doing that. There's plenty of material on that, but also we can discuss Rooke and Gardner who do stand up against it. Okay, so from there, now that I've kind of figured out how I'm going to approach the question, I have moved on to looking at my contention. So here I've written a contention, which is, in The Lieutenant, Grenville presents a thorough critique of the imperial agenda of the British establishment. However, she does view individuals who were caught up in the process much more sympathetically. Okay, so that'll be my contention, which is fairly broad. And I'm going to prove my contention with 3 reasons. Now, when I plan an essay, I think about what is my contention, and then what are my reasons for my contention. And I think about reason as being something that involves the word because. So here's a kind of a summary of what my contention is. The British were depicted as more than just imperialist invaders. I say that they were more than just imperialist invaders because, and then I give my first reason, individual British people were victims of the imperialist machine. Okay, so I've given my reason. That's one reason why they're more. And then I thought I'd just talk about the British imperialist machine, talk about slavery, Lancelot, Percival, and all of that stuff. I'd use that. I'd use the lower military people, the hanging probably. I might be able to bring the convicts in here as well, I think. Would I talk about the First Nations people? I might mention them. I've got plenty there to talk about. I just see how that developed. Paragraph 2, same contention. The British were depicted as more than just imperialist invaders. These are not my topic sentences here. These are ideas. This is an argument I'm putting together here. Because, and then my second reason, because they're not just imperialist invaders, because they have the capacity for curiosity, empathy, connection, and understanding across the cultural divide was shown. So because they're able to connect with First Nations people, particularly in New South Wales, then they're more than just invaders. And my examples were the flawed curiosity of the British, Governor Gilbert and Silk. I thought I'd use them. And then where it became much more developed and substantial with Rooke and Tagarin. Okay, my third paragraph, again, same contention. The British were depicted as more than just imperialist invaders because, and here's my reason, some characters were shown to have the capacity to act ethically and with courage, resisting injustice. And I would use their Gardner, Rooke in New South Wales, and then Rooke at the end of the novel as well in Antigua. All right. So that's my ideas, but I think if you put them as, and they would kind of work as topic sentences, but they'd be pretty kind of repetitive and wooden. So here's me shaping some topic sentences that try to get those ideas, in a little bit nicer. So with the idea that the British were victims of the imperialist machine, I might go, while the imperialist agenda of the British establishment is thoroughly critiqued, individual British were depicted as powerless pawns caught up in a brutal regime. Okay? So that, I think, sounds better than my idea, which is here. The second one, which is the idea that they're more than just depicted as more than just invaders because they show empathy and curiosity and connection and relationships, I came up with this. Grenville also highlights ways that the British colonists showed the capacity for curiosity, empathy, connection, and understanding of First Nations people they encountered in New South Wales. So because this doesn't actually have the words imperialist agenda in it, I would actually, in my paragraph, make sure that I said something along the lines of, this helps her to show that they are more than just, colonialists seeking power and money and all that sort of stuff. So I'd need to tap back into that question within the paragraph just to make sure that I got that idea in. But I think that would work quite well. Okay, and the third one, which was about characters having capacity to act ethically and with courage, resisting injustice, that's about fighting back. I came up with this one. Grenville also seeks to show the capacity of some of the British, and that word there, some, is important, to act ethically and with courage, resisting the injustices of the British colonialism. So I'm trying to tap into that idea of there being that. It's not that that's gone away, it's still there, but there were some who did other things or something different to just that, British colonialism. So that's how I've planned the essay, and it's taken me 17 minutes to explain it to you, and it took me a lot longer than that to come up with it. But if you kind of adopt that method of dealing with essay questions and you practice it a lot, you can get much, much, much quicker than it, and it becomes far more routine. All right, thanks for listening, guys.